Hello, Tau. Good evening, Omanel 1000. Holding point runway 27 left, ready for takeoff, Omanel 1000.
Oman Air 1000, Philadelphia Tower. Good evening, sir. Flight heading 230, wind 300 at 10, runway 27 left, clear for takeoff.
Clear takeoff, and after the departure, we are to take the heading 230 left, Omanel 1000. Aircrfat Icing introduction. Hello, this is Ray Cardoso again, and welcome to Clear to Climb lessons. We are about to start one more listen and interact lesson, the ultimate solution for your ICAO test. Today's topic is Aircrfat Icing. We will always begin the lesson with the main text read-through. This is the read-through for Aircrfat Icing. Let's get started. Aircrfat Icing, main text. There were two pilots. Their names were Tony and Nelson. Tony was the captain of that flight, and Nelson was the first officer. They would take off on a 4-hour flight into a very thick cloud layer. Tony and Nelson eventually took off and continued climbing to 20,000 feet, a very dangerous altitude to fly inside clouds, because at this altitude the airplane can encounter ice or can experience ice buildup. Encounter ice, it will result in ice buildup. Nelson then warned, "Captain, we went inside the clouds, and the outside air temperature is -7 degrees Celsius. It means that the OAT gauge indicated -7 degrees Celsius. Nelson says, "Don't you think we should turn on the anti-ice system?" Tony said, "Don't worry, son. There is still only a little ice. It won't do any harm." Well, the year was 1952. Ice buildup conditions and consequences were not well understood until then, or weren't well understood until then. But Nelson was a very focused and up-to-date pilot. He studied everything in advance. Nelson froze. He froze because he understood the hazards of aircraft icing. In fact, he was scared to death. He paled. Nelson knew that the most hazardous aspect of structural icing was its aerodynamic effects. He knew that ice could alter or deform the shape of an airfoil and could cause control problems. So, they continued climbing and eventually, or finally, leveled at 20,000 feet inside a layer of clouds. They continued climbing despite the temperature drop. Nelson then checked the OAT indicator, the OAT gauge. It read -20 degrees Celsius. Read in the past, okay? It read where it indicated. It's the same here. They were flying through icy weather. The OAT gauge and the visible water indicated that they were flying through a very hazardous icy weather. Nelson checked the wing leading edge. It was kind of snowy, full of ice. He saw ice building up on the wings. "Don't mind it, guy," said Tony. Well, all of a sudden, an uncommanded roll upset occurred. Tony was shocked. Nelson shouted, "Captain, disengage the autopilot and hand fly the airplane." He wanted Tony to hand fly the airplane. Tony became paralyzed. Nelson then took over the controls, disengaged the autopilot, and recovered the airplane. He took a measure, right? He took action. He took over the controls, as if from that moment on, he were the captain. He took over the controls by disengaging the autopilot and recovering the airplane. He recovered the airplane by executing the upset recovery non-normal maneuver It's on the QRH, the Quick Reference Handbook. After recovering the airplane, he turned on the anti-ice systems and started a descent to a warmer altitude. He descended to a warmer temperature to melt the ice that had built up. That's why he descended to a warmer temperature. Tony fainted. He was so shocked that he fainted. He fainted because he was very shocked. In summary, he lost consciousness. Well, Nelson eventually leveled the airplane at 10,000 feet, resumed normal flight, and landed at the nearest suitable airport. Nobody was injured during this incident. Okay, that is the end of the main text read through. Now, as always, you and me, right? We are going to tell the story again. Together, we will start the lesson and interact lesson based on a storytelling system. The method, as always, is as follows. A statement, a pause for your answer, and my answer. Another statement, a pause for your answer, and my answer. And so it goes, until we tell the whole story again. If you think you need a little more time, go ahead and pause your player. No issues if you don't understand something. You'll get better over time. So, after 3 or 4 weeks, try not pausing your player. Try to respond without pausing your player. Speed is one of the most important points here. So, speed up and let's get started. Aircrfat Icing, listen and interact lesson. There were 2 pilots. Were there what? 2 pilots, right? There were 2 pilots. Their names were Tony and Nelson. What were their names? Yes, Tony and Nelson. The names of the 2 pilots were Tony and Nelson. And who was the captain of that flight? Tony. Tony was the captain of that flight and Nelson was the first officer, right? Who were the co-pilot and the captain? Nelson and Tony, respectively, okay? Respectively, co-pilot and the captain, the co-pilot and the captain. Nelson and Tony, respectively. They would take off on a 4-hour flight into a very thick layer of clouds. How long would the flight take? How long would that flight take? Tell me. Exactly 4 hours. The length of the flight, okay? The length of the flight, the duration of the flight would be 4 hours, which is the same thing as saying that the flight would be of a 4 hours in length, or still, it would take 4 hours. Length here refers to duration, okay? The amount of time. What would they fly into? They would fly into a thick layer of clouds. They would fly inside a very thick layer of clouds. Was the layer of clouds thick? Yes, it was. It was very thick. Was it thin? No, it wasn't. It was very thick, right? The layer of clouds was very thick. Okay, so here we have an examples of, we have two pictures, a thick cloud layer or thick layer of clouds and a thin cloud layer. And for how long would they fly? 4 hours, right? They would fly for 4 hours inside a very thick layer of clouds, okay? Thin, thick, thin, thick. So Tony and Elsa eventually took off and continued climbing to 20,000 feet. A very dangerous altitude to fly inside clouds, right? So, what did they do after taking off or after the takeoff? Yes, exactly. After taking off, they continued climbing. After the takeoff, they continued climbing or continued to climb to 20,000 feet. A very dangerous altitude to fly inside clouds or to fly inside cloud layers. Pay attention to this. If takeoff is a noun, it has a hyphen, like a dash between the two words, right? Because it's a noun. And takeoff as a phrasal verb doesn't have the hyphen. And why is this altitude very dangerous to fly inside clouds? Well, because at this altitude the airplane can encounter ice or can experience ice buildup, ice formation. They were passing 15,000 feet and crossing Bellevue when they went inside the cloud layer. When did they go inside the cloud layer? When? When passing 5,000 feet and crossing Bellevue, right? When they were passing 5,000 feet and crossing Bellevue, they went inside the cloud layer. And here, this is for you to understand that you pass an altitude and you cross a position, right? Okay, Nelson then warned, Captain, we went inside the clouds, and the outside air temperature is minus 7 degrees C, or 7 degrees Celsius. What did Nelson say? He said, Captain, we went inside the clouds, and the outside temperature is minus 7 degrees Celsius. So, it means that the OAT gauge indicated minus 7 degrees Celsius. The gauge is the indicator, so gauge and indicator have both the same meaning in this case. Nelson says, don't you think we should turn on the anti-icing system? And what did Nelson suggest that the captain do? Nelson suggested that the captain turned on the anti-icing systems, right? He said, don't you think we should turn on the anti-icing systems? And what did the captain respond? Guess it, okay? Just think it up. Just create an answer. Just guess it. He said, don't worry, son. There is still only a little ice. It won't do any harm. What did Tony say? What did he say? He said, don't worry, son. There's still only a little ice. It won't do any harm. Now, did Tony think that the ice could do any harm? No, he didn't. He didn't think so. He said, don't worry, son. There's still only a little ice. It won't do any harm. So, in his opinion, that ice wouldn't do any harm. So, in his opinion, that I shouldn't do any harm. Well, the year was 1952. Ice build-up conditions and consequences weren't well understood up until then. What was the year? It was 1952, right? The year was 1952, and ice build-up conditions and its consequences weren't well understood by then. And were aircraft icing conditions and consequences well understood at that time? No, they weren't. Aircraft icing conditions and consequences were not well understood by then. But Nelson was a very focused and up-to-date pilot. He studied everything in advance. Now, was Nelson careless or distracted? No, he wasn't. He wasn't neither careless or distracted, or either careless or distracted, or he was neither careless nor distracted. In fact, he was a very focused and up-to-date pilot. He studied everything in advance. Did Nelson understand the hazards of aircraft icing? Yes, he did. Nelson understood the hazards of aircraft icing. Nelson froze. By the way, Nelson what? He froze, right? He froze. Why did Nelson freeze? So he froze. How? Why did he freeze? So he froze, right? He froze in the past. Okay. So, why did Nelson freeze? Why did he freeze? Well, he froze because he understood the hazards of aircraft icing, right? In fact, he was scared to death. In fact, he was scared to death. He paled. He what? He paled, right? Like his skin became very white. He paled. He paled because he was scared to death. He was very scary, like scared to death. Nelson knew that the most hazardous aspect of structural icing was its aerodynamic effects. What was the most hazardous aspect of structural icing? Its aerodynamic effects, right? The most hazardous aspect of structural icing was its aerodynamic effects. He knew that ice could alter or deform the shape of an airfoil and could cause control problems. He knew what? Exactly. He knew that ice could alter the shape of an airfoil and cause control problems. Okay? It could alter the shape of an airfoil. So, ice can alter the shape of an airfoil and can cause what? Tell me. I'm waiting. I'm waiting for your answer. Give an answer, please. Control problems, right? Ice can alter the shape of an airfoil and cause control problems. So they continued climbing and eventually or finally, okay, eventually and finally have both the same meaning. So they continued climbing and eventually or finally they leveled at 20,000 feet inside a cloud layer. Did they stop climbing? No, they didn't. They didn't stop climbing. They continued climbing and reached 20,000 feet. Okay, they reached 20,000 feet. Do not say reach it, okay? Say reached 20,000 feet. They continued climbing in spite of the temperature drop. Okay, in spite of the temperature dropping, they continued climbing. So they continued climbing in spite of what? They continued climbing in spite of the temperature drop. Okay, in spite of the temperature drop, they continued climbing. So as they climbed, the temperature dropped, right? Do not say drop it, not drop it, it's dropped, right? Okay, Nelson then checked the OAT indicator. The OAT gauge, it read, in the past, it read minus 20 degrees Celsius. What did the temperature drop to? It dropped to minus 20 degrees Celsius, right? The temperature dropped to minus 20 degrees Celsius. What was the outside air temperature? Minus 20 degrees Celsius, right? The OAT gauge indicated minus 20 degrees Celsius, or it read in the past minus 20 degrees Celsius. The OAT gauge read minus 20 degrees Celsius, right? Read, read, present, read, past. So the OAT gauge read minus 20 degrees Celsius. So they were flying through clear weather. So they were flying through clear weather, right? I'm waiting. Give an answer, please. I want an answer, please. No, they weren't. The OAT gauge and the visible moisture or the visible water indicated that they were flying through a very hazardous, icy weather, not a clear weather. Hazardous, dangerous, risky, same. Nelson checked the wing leading edge. It was kind of snowy, full of ice. What did Nelson check? What did he check? In the past, okay? The answer has to be in the past also. Oh, here we have a picture so you can understand the leading edge is the front edge and the trailing edge is the rear edge of an airfoil. The wing leading edge, right? Nelson checked the wing leading edge. That's what he checked. And what did he see when checking the wing leading edge? Ice. He saw ice building up on the wings. And he said, "Don't mind it, guy," said Tony. Because he knew that Nelson was worried. What did Tony say? He said, "Don't mind it, guy." But all of a sudden, an uncommanded row upset. Well, all of a sudden, An uncommanded roll upset occurred. Oh my God. What occurred? What happened? An uncommanded roll upset, right? The aircraft just roll. Uncommanded, right? All of a sudden, an uncommanded roll upset occurred. And was it slowly or rapidly? Based on the statement, okay? Rapidly, right? It happened suddenly, all at once. It was all of a sudden, right? All of a sudden, an uncommanded roll upset occurred. Tony was shocked. He got shocked. Did Tony become calm? No, Tony was shocked or petrified, which is the same thing as saying that he did not become calm. He became shocked. Nelson shouted, "Captain, disengage autopilot and hand fly the airplane." Now, what did Nelson want the captain to continue to use? Now, did Nelson want the captain to continue to use the autopilot? No, he didn't. He wanted the captain to disengage the autopilot. He wanted Tony to hand fly the airplane. Tony got paralyzed. Tony got what? Tony, the captain, got paralyzed. Nelson then took over the controls, disengaged the autopilot, and recovered the airplane. What did Nelson do? He took over the controls, right? He disengaged the autopilot and recovered the airplane. So, did Nelson let it go? No. He took a measure, right? He was assertive. He took action. He took over the controls, as if from that moment on, he were the captain. That's what he did. He took over the controls by doing what? Exactly. He took over the controls by disengaging the autopilot and recovering the airplane, right? Now, did the airplane continue upside down? The answer? Give me the answer. Of course not, right? Nelson recovered the airplane by executing the upset recovery non-normal maneuver. By executing what? Exactly right. Nelson recovered the airplane by executing the upset recovery non-normal maneuver. After recovering the airplane, he turned on the anti-icing system and started the descent to a warmer altitude. Remember, airframe icing is very dangerous due to its weight and disruption to the airflow. The disruption to the airflow. What did Nelson do next? You know, because you know the story, okay? He turned on the anti-icing systems and started the descent to a warmer altitude. So, why did he descend to a warmer altitude? Why did he descend to a warmer altitude? Well, obviously, to melt the ice. He descended to a warmer temperature to melt the ice that had built up. That's why he descended to a warmer temperature. So he turned on the anti-icing system and started the descent to a warmer altitude. What did he descend to a warmer temperature for? Or why did he descend to a warmer altitude? Here, this is to show that what for and why have both the same meaning here, right? Why did Nelson descend to a warmer temperature? Again, asking again. Again, to melt the ice that had built up. To melt the ice that had built up. He descended to a warmer temperature to melt the ice that had built up. And what happened to Tony? What happened? He fainted, right? He was so shocked that he fainted. He what? He fainted, right? He fainted. Why did Tony faint? Why did he faint? Because he was very shocked. This was why he fainted. Well, Nelson eventually leveled the airplane at 10,000 feet, resumed normal flight, and landed at the nearest suitable airport. What did he eventually do? Remember, eventually and finally have both the same meaning. Eventually, finally, at last, same. So, what did he eventually do? Exactly. He eventually leveled the airplane at 10,000 feet, resumed normal flight, and landed at the nearest suitable airport. Where did Nelson land? He landed at the nearest suitable airport. He landed at the nearest suitable. He landed at the nearest suitable airport. So, for making his decision, he took into account or into consideration only the distance of the airport, right? No, not only the distance, but also the suitability, right? He also took into account the suitability. He chose the airport because besides being the nearest one, the airport was suitable. And what does suitable mean in this case? What does it mean? Well, it means that he analyzed or that he took into consideration the weather, the runway length, and its facilities, ILS and VOR procedures, for instance, approach lights, etc. That's what suitable means in this case. So, the airport had to be the nearest one and had also to be suitable, right? That's exactly right. Not only the distance was taken into consideration, but also the suitability. The airport had to be the nearest one and had also to be suitable. So, he landed in the nearest suitable airport and nobody was injured during this incident. Now, was anybody injured in this incident? Give me an answer. I'm waiting. No, nobody was injured, right? Nobody got hurt or nobody got injured. Alright folks, that's all for today. That is the end of our listen and interact lesson. Keep up the good work. See you next time. Bye bye.